Welcome to another episode of Dad Up, everyone. Thank you guys very much for joining me. The individual that I have on today is awesome because not only is he a local, so he's around my area. I've known him, I've met him. So he's I could say a friend of mine, a good friend of mine, and he and I have kind of met a couple of times, and I'm looking forward to hanging out with him a little bit more. But he's written a book recently, and I'm excited to talk about it because I think it'll help you guys not only in what you're doing in your life as far as your business and all that, but also in your parenting and taking care of your family and all that. But my good friend, Dr. Reggie Thomas, has joined me on Dad Up. Welcome to the show, brother.
Hey man, it's good to be with you. Thanks for having me. Thanks for having
Yeah,
me. Looking forward to this conversation.
yeah, absolutely. And I'm excited to dive into your book and all that. And I'm looking forward to the book signing and all that stuff. So I know you're going to have more than one. So we'll definitely have to see what your schedule is like for that. But before we get started and all that, for my listeners who don't know who you are, let's talk a little bit about you, kind of how you grew up and how you got into the work that you're doing now with Peak Potential, and then we'll go from there and talk about your family.
That sounds great. So Brian, I am not a Californian. I grew up in Tennessee. I'm what you would call a rural small town boy. Grew up in a little town in West Tennessee called Huntington, Tennessee, less than 3,000 people. My high school was probably right around 400. And there were just slightly over 100 people in my graduating class. Um, my mom and dad, they were not, they didn't have any formal education. My mom graduated from high school. My dad didn't finish high school. My dad worked at an aluminum plant. My mom worked at a shirt factory. We had a small farm. We didn't farm for a living. We farmed to live. And so, we raised, cattle and hogs and chickens and planted crops. And so that was really good for me because what happened was it taught me responsibility. It taught me hard work. And so my upbringing was very simple, which I'm very appreciative. I still like to go back and visit my hometown once or twice a year just to kind of put me in touch with my upbringing and my heritage and all of that. I was the first to go to college in my family. So I went to a small Christian college in West Tennessee called Union University. I went into ministry, and then from there, I went to Southwestern Seminary in Fort Worth, Texas.
Hmm.
And back up a little bit, I have two younger brothers, and so I'm the oldest of my brothers. My middle brother is 3 years younger than I am, and my youngest brother is 6 years younger than I am. And we were a baseball family, so all three of us played baseball. We excelled at baseball, so we were like a baseball family. My youngest brother actually played college baseball. He went to a small college in Jackson, Tennessee, and played baseball there. He was a pitcher. Um, Met my wife back in 1988 when I was still in my master's program. We were set up by mutual friends who thought that we'd be a good pair. So when they got married, they had us in their wedding, and so that worked. So we got married June of 1989. Her name is Janine. She's a teacher here in the Chino Valley area. She's a seventh grade science teacher at Townsend Junior High. We have two daughters. They're 31 and 29. My oldest works for California Baptist University as a assistant director of campus events. My oldest works for Sprouts here in Chino Hills as one of the assistant managers. And so we live here in Chino Hills. We love it here. Been here 24 years. And so that's kind of an overview of my life. So ask any questions to fill in the blank.
Yeah, tell me a little bit about Peak Potential.
So peak potential, I started that right in the middle of the pandemic.
Okay.
So the backstory on that, Brian, was as I said, I was in ministry for 30 years. I was actually the business administrator for a church here in Chino Hills. I actually went through burnout, which
Hmm.
really was the inspiration for my new book that I just released a few weeks ago. But I actually went through burnout. And I asked the board for a sabbatical or, intentional leave of absence.
Hmm.
They granted that. I took the 10 weeks, recovered from burnout, but when it was time to go back, they decided to terminate me. So Yeah, yeah. So at the time I was 56 years old, and we're right, the pandemic had just started. It was August, and I think the shutdown started what, March
Oh man.
2020.
Yeah.
This was August 2020.
Wow.
And so I have to tell you, when they made that decision, it was a shock. Uh, it was the first time I'd ever been terminated in my
Mm,
30-year career, and I didn't know what that felt like. I had friends who had been terminated and knew the devastation that that caused for them, but I had no idea what that felt like. And
mm,
so, um, for about 2 weeks, I was in a funk. I was in an emotional pit,
hmm
and um, and so I experienced all the different emotions you can imagine. I was angry,
hmm
I was frustrated, I was scared because here I am, 56 years old, middle of the pandemic. What am I going to do?
Right.
Um, lost a six-digit income, and so I thought, what am I going to do? So I always had this dream of starting my own business, going into business consulting. And so so I decided to take that leap and start my business called Peak Potential. So Peak Potential is a business consulting firm. And what I do is I do keynote speaking, motivational speaking, professional development training, and I do people management consulting. I help leaders and managers to manage their people, help them with their culture, and then I do one-on-one executive coaching. It's gone very, very well. I mean, I tell you, I am more energized today than I've ever been in my career. I love what I'm doing. I wake up every morning excited because I feel like I'm making a difference. And so, just having the time of my life.
Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome. Well, for you being what you thought was just a devastating thing being terminated, uh, obviously, you look at those kind of events and things that happen that are bad in our lives or things that we don't really expect. We go, well, obviously that's the devil at work, that's Satan at work, and he's trying to disrupt my plan and trying to get me away from my faith in the Lord. And this isn't a biblical podcast, but I'm going to go down that road for a minute. You were terminated, which you thought was devastating. I can only imagine. I've never been terminated myself. And here you are in the start of a pandemic, which most people are stuck in the homes, can't do nothing. And you're like, what am I supposed to do, Lord? Well, he was opening a door for you, brother. He was opening a door, and he said,
Absolutely.
absolutely. He said, what you need to do is just sit back and hold on because I'm about to introduce you to something. And,
Mhm.
sometimes I'll tell you people out there when things happen in your life, whether it's for you personally or within your family, there could be a reason behind that. And you just have to trust and believe that there's a reason for what it is that has maybe happened that you're not happy with. Just believe that, have faith in that, hold on to that, pray about it, and the Lord will get you through whatever struggle you're going through. I promise you that. I promise you that. And if you're having struggles or something like that and you need to talk to somebody, do it. You can reach out to me for crying out loud, but do it. Talk to somebody. But I'm glad that it's going to sound weird, but I'm glad that you were terminated because this opened an opportunity for you, seriously, for you to help others. The Lord said, "Hey, I want you to go on helping others. No more about preaching the word and all that. I want you to go on helping others, and I want you to do good work there." So yeah, kudos to you. I'm happy for you. I'm glad that's going well. And yeah, I mean that's awesome.
Well, I'm glad you went down that path. I'm glad you opened that door. Because Bryan, when I go through things in life, I process emotionally, rationally, and spiritually. And of course, obviously, whenever you go through any challenge or pain or adversity, obviously you're going to process things emotionally. You're going to feel these different emotions. But at some point, you've got to get rational and practical about what you're going through, and come up with options as to how you're going to respond.
Mhm.
And like you, I am a follower of Jesus. And so I think because of that, we have to also process spiritually. And as I was going through, in that time between termination and deciding to start a new company, went through this spiritual reflection, spiritual processing. I thought about Joseph, the passage in the book of Genesis, chapter 50, of course I won't bore you with all the details leading up to that, but Joseph, when he saw his brothers again after they had treated him and after all the things he had been through, he
Hmm.
looked at his brothers and he said, you meant it for evil, but God meant it for good.
Hmm.
And when I look at my experience, that's exactly the way that I look at it. I know in my heart that I didn't do anything that deserved to be terminated. I think it was because the board just didn't, and they're good men, by the way. Um, I want to make sure that, I clarify that. I had a good relationship with them. I think their issue was they just did not understand burnout.
Hmm.
Um, and but I think it turned out, I think it was God's way of redirecting my life.
Hmm.
So that's the way I look at it. I didn't understand it at the time, but 4 years with enough in the rearview mirror, I'm looking at what I've experienced, the people that I've been able to work with and help. Uh, there's no question in my mind that God was in the middle of all this. So yeah, I'm fulfilled, so fulfilled, more fulfilled than I've ever been. And I like the fact, and this is going to sound weird maybe, but I like the fact that I was able to leave the bubble of church ministry and get out in the real world,
Hmm.
because what I have found 30 years of ministry, you're confined to just, the walls of the church,
Right.
very little influence outside of those four walls. But I think being a business consultant now, I mean, I've got favor in the community. I've built a lot of relationships, a lot of networks, and I feel like my ministry now is just it's a different setting.
Yeah.
It's in the business community.
Yeah.
So didn't need to go long on that, but yeah, that was something that I wanted to just kind of share.
Yeah,
So
no, that's awesome. That's awesome. And I think, looking forward, I mean, there's a reason why the car window front windshield is good is big where the rear view mirror is so small. That's the point is like the comparison there is that we want to continue to look forward and look out the front window of what's ahead for us. So good for you, man. Um, you have experienced burnout. I have experienced burnout. I've gone through transitions or seasons in my life where my boys were growing up. I coached them in sports from the ages of 4 all the way up through high school. And so there were times when I was coaching both boys on two different teams because they're different ages, two different teams on top of my full-time job, on top of going to school, on top of trying to be a husband. So I was doing all those things. And there were points where I experienced burnout and ways that I incorporated making me feel better, or at least helping me kind of forget all the stress that I had. Um, I drank alcohol. That's what I did. I was not really a social drinker. I would drink at home. I wasn't a drinker. I didn't drink and drive. I never had drinks before I was coaching, any of those kinds of things. So those things were very important to me. But when I got home, that's when I would, relax and have the beers. And I found I was in the Marine Corps, so they teach us three things in the Marines: how to kill, how to cuss, and how to drink. So I mean that's kind of where I get it from. But I mean, I found myself like I was completely burned out and run down, and I thought this was a way to help me feel better is to incorporate my friend called alcohol, and it wasn't. I found it becoming more damaging not only to me but to my family. And one day I had noticed myself, I was sitting in my chair and I was watching TV and I asked my 10-year-old son, can you do me a favor and go get me a beer? And so he's like, okay, dad. He went and got me a beer, brought it back. And I went, it just like hit me like right across the chin, like a brick going against my head. What are you doing? You're teaching your kids about alcohol by having them bring you alcohol. And I thought, okay, I need to do something. I need to make a change. I had a conversation with my wife and she said, yeah, I've been meaning to talk to you about that because it's been getting pretty bad. And I quit. I just said, you know what? Enough's enough. And I quit cold turkey. September 7th, this September. So, what, in a week and a half or so, will be 15 years sober for me. So, uh, I did
congratulations.
experience burnout, and there were different things that I did to incorporate or make me feel better. And unfortunately, it was my addiction to substance. So for people that are going through burnout, I know you wrote a book about it, but let's incorporate it with parenting because parenting can burn us out, right? Parenting burns us
Yes.
out. I coach a lot of dads, and I'll get into that, but I want to hear a little bit about how you compare burnout in the family structure, and then we'll get into it in the business structure.
Brian, thanks for sharing that, man. That's what I like about podcasts sometimes is you learn as much about the host as the host learns about you. And
Mhm.
so you and I haven't had an opportunity to sit down and just have a personal, intimate conversation. But yeah, thanks for sharing that part of your journey. So, first of all, burnout often is associated with the job.
Mhm.
And that is an epidemic professionally. In fact, the statistics say that about 77% of the population has experienced burnout in their current job. Man,
Mm.
that's high. But burnout is not exclusive to just the work situation.
Mhm.
There are other things, other responsibilities that can create burnout, and a lot of times when you go through burnout, it's a combination of family stuff, work stuff, personal stuff, and having raised two girls like you, I was an engaged dad. I was very involved in my kids. In fact, so much so that I was a big golfer for about 4 years. When my wife and I first got married, we didn't have kids for the first 4 years, and so during that time, I picked up golf. I played golf 2 times a week. I'd go to the driving range once or two nights a week. I mean, because being double income, no kids, you had time to do that. And so when I started my family, I put golf down and I said, okay, when the kids, get a certain age, I'll pick up golf again, which I've never picked it back up. I picked up running instead. But I was that dad that, I sat down every night with my kids, helped them with their homework. My kids were involved in sports, so, you had practices throughout the week, games on the weekend. Um, I mean, your life just kind of revolved around your kid, but you're doing that plus maintaining your real job,
Right.
plus all the other things that come with running a household. And so, yeah, it is possible and real when you talk about burnout as it relates to parenting. And so, in my book, I talk about how to manage burnout. And one of the things that you do to manage burnout is you have to practice self-care. Okay.
Hmm.
A lot of employees don't understand what that means. They feel like they have to be loyal, committed to. And what they don't understand is taking care of yourself doesn't mean that you're not committed and loyal to your company. The very same thing is true with parenting. You're going to be a better parent if you take care of yourself. And what I mean by that is you've got to take care of yourself spiritually. You've got to spend time with the Lord every day. You need that strength. You need wisdom to be a parent, so you need to spend time with the Lord every single day. Physically, you've got to take care of yourself. And by the way, I'm so excited about the health journey you're on right now.
Thank you.
You're a great example, Bryan. And so physically, you've got to take care of yourself. Emotionally, you've got to take care of yourself. When we do those kind of things, we're going to be better parents. We're going to be better for our kids. But oftentimes, in the responsibility of taking care of our kids, we burn the candle at both ends. We
Hmm.
go through this burnout phase. And what we do then is we kind of lose that motivation for parenting. It becomes an obligation versus a joy.
Right.
And so, yeah, burnout does apply to the family life as well.
Yeah. I totally agree. And self-care is so important. It's something that I talk about a lot. And the reason that I mentioned that I coach a lot of dads is because that's one of the things that I talk about with them because when I coach dads about how to really become a better parent and a better uh, leader for their family and also a better husband, but they talk about, listen, I'm just, I have a full-time job or I run a full-time business and I'm gone 50 hours, 60 hours a week sometimes. And when I get home, I just don't have the energy. I'm just burnt out. That's what they say. I'm just literally burnt out. And one of the things I talk about is I said, well, you're taking care of your business and you're taking care of all that stuff, but are you really taking care of yourself? And what I mean by that is a self-care. And that's what you just referenced. Self-care is so important because I have three different ideas where I share with dads where I say, listen, your number one priority is your relationship with the Lord. Number two is the relationship or the self-care for you. Number three, then comes your spouse. And then number four is your kids. Your kids are actually
Right.
last. And so I talk about self-care in the sense that you need to take care of yourself. So what I talk about is meditation. I talk about exercise, getting rid of bad habits, whether it's smoking or drinking. And I don't necessarily tell them they have to quit that stuff. I just say cut back on that stuff. And those kind of things, just incorporating those little tweaks can really go a long way to helping
Yes.
you be a little bit more active or alert in your family. Because when you're burnt out and you come home from the office or your business, you walk in the door, almost majority of the time, there's a little bit of chaos going on in the house. Your wife's, tired and stressed because she's been doing stuff all day. Maybe she's cooking dinner now. The kids are running around. It can be chaos. So the last thing you want to do is like, now I'm burnt out and now I'm really frustrated. So what happens? You lose your temper, you get frustrated, you get upset, you get disconnected from your family, and that ultimately destroys a bond and relationship that you should have with your kids and also your wife, also your spouse. So burnout, being taking care of yourself first is so important. And if your cup's not full when you get home, if your cup's empty, how in the world are you going to take care of your family? So taking
Exactly.
care of yourself and filling up your cup before you can take care of your family, because you want to make sure that's full so you have the energy to do that.
And Brian, the other thing I would add to that, I always talk about the rhythm of rest. I believe that, we were created to be in a rhythm. You work, rest, work, rest. I don't think as Americans we do a good job of that. My wife and I recently we've started doing international travel. What we've noticed, especially certain places in Europe, and South America and Central America, people are a lot more laid back than we are
Mhm.
here in the United States. I mean, we have glorified overworking,
Mhm.
glorify it. We wear it as a badge of honor. And I believe that we were designed and created to rest. So I always tell people, take your vacations, take your PTO, go on weekend trips. And as it relates to parenting, we were always big. My wife and I were always big on, family vacations, creating memories for our kids. That's
Mhm.
so important. But we also, my wife and I also made it a habit of our own little getaways, having vacations away from the kids. And I'm gonna tell you, after a couple of days, man, you start to miss those little angels. You start to miss them. And when you come back, man, you're ready to re-engage as a parent. But that rhythm of rest, I think it's important in preventing burnout. And so, you know, I had to take a 10-week sabbatical, a 10-week leave of absence. And I always tell people that if you don't take intentional times of rest, you're going to be forced to shut it down, like I
Mhm.
did, because I didn't address my burnout until later. I actually went through burnout for about 2 years before I took it seriously. And
Mhm.
so I got into what was called chronic burnout because I didn't address it early enough. And
Right.
so, if you do these little things as you go through life, and you're a marathon runner just as I am. I mean, one of the analogies that I use is when we run marathons, we have to uh, we have to carb load up ahead
Mhm.
of the race.
Yeah.
We load up on electrolytes, we load up on our hydration. But as you run the race, you lose those nutrients.
Mhm.
And I don't know what you use when you run marathons, but I use a gel called Martens. It's a
Oh,
little packet
yeah, I
that
haven't
you,
used them. They're expensive, but
yeah,
yeah, I've
very
been meaning to
expensive.
try them.
And they have about 125 calories, per package. And I do it every 5 miles, And what you're doing is you're replenishing your energy so that you have strength at the end of the
Mhm.
race. And I think in parenting, you've got to be feeding yourself as you're going through the obligations and responsibilities of parenting. You've got to be feeding yourself. You've got to be filling your own cup as you're doing the responsibility of parenting. And I think a part of that is that rhythm of rest.
Mhm. Yeah. I think yeah, I think you're right. I mean, rest is important, and that obviously includes getting a good night's sleep. But I mean, when you think about going to the office and working, you should incorporate at least your job, or if you run a business, you should incorporate rest throughout the day. And what I encourage dads to do is, listen, we got so many hours in the day that we're working 8 to 10 hours, right? Maybe even 12 hours. But you are constantly go, 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 go. Sometimes you're so go, 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 go that you're not even eating lunch, like you're eating lunch at your desk or something because you're so busy doing stuff. And I tell dads, break up your day into little sections and give yourself little small rewards for each of those breaks that you're taking. So even if it's 3 or 4, take a break and step away from the computer, step away from the work, maybe go for a walk, or maybe go sit in your car and listen to some music or something just to kind of decompress.
Yeah.
Just take it. It's just 5 minutes is all you got to do,
Right.
to allow yourself to just kind of fill back up and get yourself re-energized to start your next task, which is your next break in the or next day. What is, considering maybe breaking one day up into several days. Do you know what I
Mhm.
mean?
Right.
So taking those little breaks are so important and will make you feel so much better towards the end of the day. I mean, comparing it to a marathon run, it's like we talked about at the beginning where we were recording, because he and I are both runners. So we were talking about, all of our running experiences. And every 2 miles, 2 to 2.5 miles, there's an aid station. And that aid station, the purpose behind that aid station is for you to rest and rehydrate, rest and refuel.
Right.
So you typically walk through the aid station, grab your drinks, grab your whatever fuel that they hand out, take it down, and then you continue on again. Those are the little breaks, and they do that throughout the entire marathon, 2.5 miles. They do that throughout the entire marathon. So those are important when it comes to us as not only for dads, for moms too, but those are important because it'll help us keep going.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So I want to talk a little bit about when it comes to burnout. You wrote this book. It just came out, obviously, and I know it's been doing well. What has been, I know within the book, you share stories, personal stories, and stuff like that within the book. So I'm curious, are there any personal stories that you have that you could share with the audience as far as your experience with burnout, and how did you overcome that experience or that situation?
So back in 2018, I began to feel tired, and I thought that's what it was. I thought, okay, I'm just physically tired, so I just need a break. I just need to go on a vacation. So, and of course, all of us in our careers and our work, we go through those seasons where we just kind of come to a place where, okay, it's time to take a vacation, time to take a week or two off, rest, renew. So my wife and I, we took our first international vacation, went to Italy. It was a great vacation, did a tour of Venice, Florence, Rome, wonderful vacation. At the end of the vacation, about a day or so before we had to fly back to the States, I'm like dreading it. And I'm like, okay, that's a weird feeling because typically when right before vacation, I'm like ready to get back to it.
Right.
Wasn't ready to come back. And when I finally got back, before I went to work, I had this emotional sense of dread and I was still tired.
Mm.
And I thought, that's weird because typically, I go through this once a year like any other professional. You take a vacation in the summer, you come back and you're good. Good until, next summer. And so that didn't work. And so several months later, I did it again. And then the burnout continued. I did it again. We went to another vacation. Actually, I won a trip to Israel. So my wife and I went to Israel. So that was great. And so same thing, Bryan came back, dreaded work, tired. And I thought, this is weird. This is weird. And so this was 2019, got through that year. And the reason I was able to get through a lot of my burnout without people noticing is I have a really strong work ethic. I'm good at hiding things. I
Right.
didn't talk about it. And so 2020 rolled around and I'm fried. And so finally, I had to talk about it. So I talked to my senior pastor about it. I talked to the chairman of the board about it, and what that ended up leading to was me requesting time off. And
Mhm.
so during my sabbatical, I did nothing but rest. I I I developed a kind of a accountability group or support group of 5 guys. I checked in with them every day. I slept in every day, took naps during the day, did a lot of reading, uh, did a lot of talking with people who had gone through burnout. The one thing that I didn't get to do is typically when you go through burnout, they have these centers that you can go through, retreat centers where you stay a
Mhm.
week
Mm.
and you're with other people that have gone through it. They have group sessions, they have one-on-one counseling, and they do a lot of fun activities. Just a place where you can go and just reflect and rest. Couldn't do that because COVID shut all those centers down. And so my recovery methods had to be things that I did for myself. And so I spent a lot of time with family. Got through the sabbatical, and like I said, at the end of it, I felt like I had recovered. I mean, 10 weeks, you need more than 10 weeks to completely recover. But during those 10 weeks, I did start to refill my tank enough where I could go back and re-engage in work. And then when it was time to go back, that's, as I already mentioned, the board decided,
Yeah.
no, you're no longer a fit for us. And so that's a little bit about my journey as I went through it. Some of the things that I felt, some of the signs for me, number one, I lost my motivation, lost my passion for what I was doing. Um, I went through about 2 years of insomnia where I couldn't sleep. And I talk about all this in the book.
Mhm.
I became detached. I'm a high extrovert. I love being around people. And Brian, I remember the last year that I was on staff at the church as the executive pastor. I remember every day around 11:45 to 12, I'd leave my office, and I lived 2 miles from where I worked. I'd leave my office, I'd come home and eat lunch here at home because I didn't want to be around people.
Mhm.
So those were some of my symptoms. So burnout, there are behavioral symptoms, there are emotional symptoms, and there are physical symptoms. My physical symptoms were fatigue and insomnia. My emotional symptoms were just losing my passion, my motivation, and my behavioral symptoms were I just became detached. And so the beginning of 2020, I decided, man, I need to address this. And the alarms were going off over 2 years. I just didn't listen to them. I had people tell me that I needed to pay attention to what I was going through.
Well,
My,
let me ask you something. Interrupt you. I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I
oh,
want to
go
ask you
ahead.
something because when you're talking about that, all I could think about was maybe your wife and your daughters maybe saying, "Hey, what's wrong with you? Something doesn't seem right. Something seems off." Did your family notice? And if they did they say anything? If so, they didn't notice.
Brian, I called everybody off guard.
Hmm.
Um, I'm good at hiding things. Now, let me just say this. Initially, I didn't know I was in burnout. I did mention to my wife that I'm tired. My wife actually made comments at some points. Hey, you need to take a break. You look tired. You seem tired. You seem kind of checked out. But burnout wasn't on either of our radars.
Hmm.
Okay. My kids didn't, and of course, my kids didn't live here at the time.
Right. Okay.
But no, my kids didn't notice anything. My wife didn't notice anything. They did notice things, but they didn't know that it was serious. They didn't know that it was burnout. And then again, I'm pretty good at hiding things and covering things up. Um, Even people at my church didn't pick up on it because I went through the motions. Okay. I was still that happy Reggie. I still did the work. I still showed up. And so nobody had a clue. In fact, one of the elders told me that, he didn't see any of the signs of burnout.
Hmm.
And so I did a pretty good job of hiding it,
Hmm. Yeah.
which was a mistake, which was a
Yeah.
mistake.
Yeah. One of the ways that, and I talked about it earlier, but one of the ways, I'm just going to say dads, men, hide those kinds of things is through various addictions, whether it's, alcohol, even drugs or nicotine or gambling, or maybe even pornography. I mean, those kind of things can take the place of trying to get through that burnout process. And that's why I talk about, taking several breaks throughout the day, breaking up your day into several days. And so for us as dads, I know we addressed it earlier, but self-care is important. Um, Even like I said, stepping away from your work, the desk, the computer, you're not staring at the computer all day, will help get you engaged. And so, burnout, when it comes to burnout and the story that you shared, I know that there are, in your book, you talk about the symptoms, right? You talk about the symptoms of burnout, and then you talk about how to recognize it, right? As far as internalize it. And then you also talk about self-care. And then you talk about stories and things like that.
Sounds like you've read the book, Brian.
I've done a little bit of research, let's just say.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so it's important for dads to understand. And I say dads because it's a dad up podcast, but this is for moms too. It's important for you to understand that if you're experiencing something like that, and I'm just kind of piggyback off what he was talking about earlier. But if you're experiencing something like that, the important thing is that if you've recognized it, you should recognize it, own it, because it's okay. If you're burnt out, that's okay. It's not a bad thing. That's okay. And then if you have to, share it. So talk to somebody. And one of my biggest support systems that I have to talk to is my wife. And I have gone through series in my life, seasons where I have been at times burnt out, but I've also gone through seasons of severe anxiety, some seasons of pretty significant depression. And so, one of the biggest things that I've done to help me overcome that is talking to somebody. I talk to my wife all the time about different things that I'm feeling, different things that are going on with me mentally, because taking care of your mental health is super important. And he also
Yes.
talks about that in the book. So, taking care of your mental health is really important. And for me, taking care of my mental health, I knew was part of my issue with my burnout and part of my issue with my anxiety and depression. The other thing that I highly encourage, and I know dads, you have a kind of this ego on your shoulders, or you carry this ego with you, but talking to a therapist can also be very helpful. That's one of the things that I do regularly. I talk to a therapist every 2 weeks. And I
Hmm.
don't do that because I have these issues. I do that because I don't want to have these issues. I don't want to experience different struggles in my life, not only mentally, but physically and emotionally and spiritually. So I do have a therapist that I talk to a couple times a week. A couple times a month. My wife and I also have a marriage coach, and we go and talk to her every other month about our marriage to keep it healthy. Because yes, we can have burnout in our marriage too. You
Yes.
can have
Yes.
burnout in your marriage, especially for someone like me that's been married to my wife for almost 28 years. And you were obviously longer, but it is something that can cause burnout. We're burnt out from being around each other all the time. I need a break, right?
Yeah.
So those kinds of things, that's why we have a marriage coach. So we know how to get those through those little challenges and struggles that we face. So talk about that. I mean, we're talking about burnout in the sense of family right now, but burnout when it comes to even our own relationships within the household.
Well, let me say this to dads. I want to share this just from my heart. There's something, Brian, that we guys don't do very well. Guys, we struggle with going deep.
Mm.
And one of the things I've learned over the last 10 years is I need other guys. I need other dads. And this journey that I'm on right now of being an authentic, transparent person, vulnerable at times, I haven't always been this way. That's something that I've developed over the last 10 years out of a sense of the importance. I want to say to dads today, connect with other dads, connect with other dads. I've got a group of guys that I get together with regularly, and we just talk. It's a safe place. We talk about our struggles. We talk about our celebrations. We encourage each other. We hold each other accountable. That is so, so important. Um, you know, guys, we tend to want to just only talk about sports or talk about work. We keep it on the shallow, but you've got to have some other guy friends, dads that you can go to and you guys just talk, you chat, you go deep, and you help each other out. I think that's very important. And we've brought scripture into this conversation, Bryan, a few times this morning. I was sharing with somebody the other day that in the New Testament there are 40 one another passages. Love one another,
Right.
honor one another, prefer one another. It goes on and on and on and on. And what those one another passages, what they're teaching us is that we have to do life together. The Christian life is not designed to be lived in isolation. Bear each other's burdens in Galatians chapter 6. And so I think it's important for a part of that self-care is the social aspect. I mean, we've talked about the spiritual, the emotional, the physical, the self-care, but I think the social aspect is also a big part of that as well. So I just wanted to share that as well.
Yeah, no, it's very, really important. And I love the fact that you kind of have a group of men that you talk to regularly. It's interesting that you bring that up because I'm going to share something with you that it's something that I incorporated a few years ago. Right now, we are actually on a little bit of a break, but I incorporated what I like to call or refer to as my personal board of directors. And what I mean by that is when we're running a business or a company is running itself, right? It's basically managed or ran by direction from the board of directors. And so I thought, why? Now I thought this is like I thought I just came up with this brilliant idea, but I found out over time that there are other people that have actually recommended this kind of system, but I had no idea. But I realized, okay, well, if businesses can do that to help them thrive and help them be better as a company, why can't we as individuals do that to help us be better as individuals, whether it's family, whether it's our self-care, whether it's spiritually, whether it's emotionally, whether it's our finances, all those kinds of things. So I did this thing where I found a group of men that I recruited in to be my board of directors, and we would meet every other month for an hour virtually because they're all over the world. Like a couple guys in
Okay.
Canada, a guy in Florida, a guy in Texas. I mean, they're all over the place, right? So we meet virtually every other month. And what we did with that, we were so committed that I actually filled out or I put together a contract where they would commit to what they were going to do for the board. And then I would commit what I was going to do for them. And I put that in the contract and had them sign it, and I signed it. And I had them all send it to me, and they all agreed. And so that's how serious I took it. And I called it the Data Tribe. And
I love it.
it's great. And that was my support system. So those were a group of guys, other dads that I was around that really helped me become better. I put this podcast studio together by their direction. They said, you need a podcast studio where you can really, you have a signage and all that kind of stuff. And I had no direction on how to do that. And I thought, I don't have time for that. And they said, you don't have time not to do that. You have time to do plenty of that. You just need to incorporate the time somewhere and figure it out. And
Hmm.
they really pressured me. Like we have a back channel on Instagram, and they were jokingly, they were like knocking me for not
Wow.
getting it done to kind of like
Wow.
force me to do it. And so that's the responsibility of a board of directors, is like to force you to do something, to make a change, to make things for the better. And it was it was the happiest thing that I did. And the other thing was health wise, helping me be better health wise. So a personal board of directors is great. You don't have to do it that way, but even a Bible study group is awesome. And even if you just have that community of guys like Reggie does, where you meet, it doesn't even have to be every week, but you meet every couple of weeks where you have coffee together, or you do it virtually, or even over the phone. Uh, so super important.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
One of the other things that I highly recommend when it comes to our social health is checking in with people. I do that every single month. I take a group of people, typically three or four. I usually do it with, I do usually also incorporate family that's long distance, but I take three or four individuals that are acquaintances of mine, and I send out a text. That's all I do. I just send out a text, say, hey, thinking about you, anything that I can pray for you for. Hope you're doing okay. If you have time to chat, we'd love to just chat with you for a few minutes on the phone and catch up. I do that every month, and I pick different individuals every month. And it's great. That's my way of taking care of my social, health, if you will.
Oh, that's great. I love that. I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so you share the stories and stuff like that in your book, and you also talk about social interaction within the book as well. So, I want to ask you this: when it comes to your business, you are an entrepreneur, obviously. Your girls are grown out of the house. You have a relationship with your wife, obviously. Taking care of that relationship is important. But then you sat down and wrote a book, which I know is a commitment because I'm doing it myself right now. So I know it's a commitment. How did you prevent that burnout as you're writing a book? Did you happen to come up as you're writing the book? Did you happen to go, wow, that's a great idea through your research, or maybe that's a great idea. I should incorporate that in my own life. Were there any of those discoveries for you that you could share that maybe dads would or parents can take away from?
Well, yes, yes. So, the when I was writing the book, it was very therapeutic. I mean, I've written two books, but this one was very special because I was actually writing about something that was very personal, and it was something that was a pain point. That's why it's called Burnout Pains. That's why I called it that. And really, the book is my story, but it also has a lot of good concepts and principles around prevention, burnout recovery, what it is. But it was a place for me, it was space for me, Bryan, to just dump. It was part of that final processing of what I had gone through 4 years ago. And there were some learnings that came out of that. Yes, there were some learnings that came out of that as I was writing the book. Um, a big learning that came out as I was writing was not only was I burned out on my current job, but I was burned out um, in my profession at large, And as I mentioned earlier, I think God used it to redirect my life. So it was a time of reflection. It was a time of insights. I had some light bulb moments as I was writing and so forth. But as it comes to dads, um, I think one of the things that I want to say to dads, one of the learnings is in my book, I talk about how your personality plays into burnout. It's not just your
Mhm.
environment, it's your personality. I'm a type A personality, so I'm a perfectionist and I can get very dissatisfied with myself. And I think where a lot of dads struggle is with this idea, hey, I'm not perfect. I think in our heads we know that, but we have a hard time accepting it. We know that we're human, we're going to blow it, we're going to mess up. But I think a lot of dads, they think, oh my gosh, I'm a terrible dad because I yelled at my kid or I should have done it this way. And you're not perfect, okay? You're not going to be perfect. You're going to mess up. And so I think one of the reasons I burned out is I went through my career thinking I had to be the perfect pastor. I had to be the perfect guy. And it wore on me. And I think a lot of dads do the same thing, Bryan, and and you're a great dad. You're a great dad.
Thank you.
But I'm sure you can tell countless stories of times where, man, I shouldn't have said that. I shouldn't have
Mhm.
done that. I should have done it differently. So embrace your humanity and just rely on God's grace to help you be the best dad you can be. And then where you do make those mistakes, just trust the grace of God that it's not going to mess your kids up.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's one of the things that I talk to dads about all the time is um, discovering that, yeah, we're not perfect. We weren't meant to be perfect. And there's only one being that's perfect and we know where he's at. So we have to realize that and recognize that. What's important though, what is important is that when you recognize that, you learn how to learn from that and grow from that to be better so it doesn't happen again. And what I tell dads is one way I want you to start working on yourself is I want you to focus on just being 1% better each day. Now, 1% isn't a lot, right? It's a very small amount. So I want you to focus on being 1% better every day. And here's why, because over time, that 1% stacked up is quite a huge percentage, right? So you're talking about 1% every day throughout the entire year. A year from now, you're over 300% better than you were last year. So even though it's a little bit, it still can stack up and accumulate to where it compounds into this massive growth for you. And that comes down to really recognizing the mistakes you made, because you can also make those mistakes with your family. And if you recognize them, it teaches your kids how they can recognize and overcome the mistakes that they make. You're going to continue to make mistakes. As Reggie said, you're going to make mistakes. Trust me, my boys are 25 and 22, and I still make mistakes with them. So
Mhm.
we're human. But one thing I have to do is own it. And that was very tough for me in the very beginning. When my kids were little, that was very tough for me to own my mistakes. It's like I used to think, because this is how I was raised, it's my way or the highway. Like, you're not going to talk this way. You're not going to act this way. You're not going to do this. I don't care what the excuse is. You're not doing this. This is how it's going to be. And that just wasn't working. And so I had to change my ways, and that included controlling my anger. That included controlling my yelling, my high pitched voice. What happens when we talk, when we yell at another human being, or we yell in an angry tone to our kids or our wife? If that happens, typically what happens is it's met with the same energy. So if I was upset at Reggie, I yell at him and shout at him, I'm upset with you, blah, blah, blah. Reggie meets me with the same energy
Yep.
right back at me, right? Then what happens? It's not where it stays. What happens? I go, oh, he's met with me with the same energy. Now I need to raise my energy up a little bit more. And now I'm even more angry. Well, what does he do? He does the same thing. So it catapults into this massive problem between your relationship with you and your spouse, or you and your kids, or you and your business, or you and your coworkers, or you and your customers. Things like that happen. And so it's important to recognize that, control it, and change it, own your mistakes, and work on growing to get better.
Yeah, yeah. Something funny here, Brian. My dad was a hard man, hard man. I mean, he raised three boys. Um, my dad was not an encourager. He was not a nurturer. I mean, he was just a hard, hard man. And my point in saying that is, I think in order to be an effective dad, you've got to unlearn some things. And I'm talking about
Yeah.
generational patterns and even generational curses. Because my dad was raised that way. He raised his boys the way he was raised. I went into marriage with that same mindset, with those same patterns. And I think God gave me two girls for a reason, because I had to unlearn some things. My youngest daughter, I remember getting onto her. She was probably 3 years old, and I was yelling at her, and I mean, she had done something that I needed to correct. I just didn't handle it very well, and I'm getting on to her, and all of a sudden, I see the countenance on her face change. Her lips started to quiver, and
Mhm.
then and then she started crying. You're shouting at me. And boy, that got to me. And I thought, oh my gosh. I mean, she's a little girl. She's sensitive. I can't, I can't parent this way. And so I had to change what I had been taught,
Mhm.
what had been modeled for me, what I'd seen in my dad. I couldn't parent the way my dad parented. And so a lot of it is unlearning some stuff too.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And a lot of the things that we go through in life now as adults are a direct reflection of how we are raised, and things that happened in our life, meaning in our youth, in our younger years. And that those triggers still may carry with you into adulthood. And that's something that I have learned, that I have recognized, not only in my personal therapy, but also with our marriage coach. She's helped me to recognize some of my behaviors within our marriage is a direct reflection of how I was raised or treated when I was growing up. And my dad was the same way. He was hard. But one thing my dad did, he was pretty affectionate, and he always told me he loved me, but it almost seemed ungenuine. Almost seemed like it wasn't, like it was just routine for him. But he was very hard on me. He was very tough on me. He was very critical of me. So that led into my lack of confidence in myself. And so those things can happen. And when it comes to our kids in particular, there are times when we have to really, really check ourselves because we never know what's going on in our kids' head. They may be really struggling with something. And if they recognize that you're not available for them in your behavior, in your expressions, in your tone, in your energy, if they realize that you're not available for them, they will eventually seek other things. That could be other people that you don't know. That could be online relationships that you know nothing about. There's a lot of predators online. That could be habits that they start to develop. The friends outside the home that maybe are not the best influences on them. That leads to other things because what they're doing is they're seeking that attention to help them get through something or help them be better. And you need to make sure you're there for your kids. I'll tell you a really funny story, or it's not funny. It's actually a really serious story, but it's a comparison of how we need to, as parents, be aware of what our kids are trying to tell us. And it was a story of a dad who was busy working at the computer and he was really, really stressed out. He was having a tough day, but he was working and his son came into the room. He's a little guy, 4 or 5, came into the room and said, "Dad, how much money do you make? Like, basically, what's your salary?" And the dad got mad and he said, "That's inappropriate. That's none of your business. You shouldn't be asking that question. You don't ask any adult that question. I'm really busy. Get out of here." And the kid walked out. He was really upset. He felt like he was just disregarded. A short time later, he came in and he tried to ask again, but a different way. He said, "Dad, I just need to know what you charge like customers or what you charge people. I just need to know like how much money I need to have." And he said, he snapped at him again. And then he realized, you know what? I need to go in and talk to my son about what he just did because I'm still upset about it. He walked into his son's room and says, "Listen, you shouldn't ask people how much they make. It's not appropriate. It's you just shouldn't be doing it. Why are you really insistent upon knowing how much money I make?" And he said, "Dad, I just want to know how much money you make because I want to buy a little bit of time from you. I need a little bit of time to get attention from you. And so I wanted to pay for you for an hour's worth of work. So if I could
Wow.
have an hour." And it just hit him like, now that's just an analogy. It's not a true story. It's just an analogy, but it tells us, hey, the kids are trying to tell us something when they're going through something or need some assistance from you. If you as parents are not paying attention to that or not paying attention to what they're saying, it will go down another path. And then when they become older, you're not going to have the strength and bond that you had with them before. And that when they're adults and they come back to us as adults, that relationship's not going to be there. There's going to be a disconnection. So it's
Yeah.
important to recognize that and understand that.
Yeah. I want to piggyback on something you said earlier. I think emotional intelligence is so important in parenting. You were talking about if you come into a conversation or a situation with this energy, the next person, that person, your kid is going to match that energy. And in order for that conversation to continue, since your kid or whomever came up to that same energy, you're going to raise your energy. That's escalating. And as parents, what we want to do is de-escalate.
Mm-hmm.
And, one of the things that I think you and I both are experiencing is we'll always be parents.
Mm-hmm.
We'll always be parents. I mean, I've got a 31-year-old and a 29-year-old. I'm still dad. My role has changed.
Right.
My role has changed. When they lived at home and they were younger, I was more of a director. Now I'm more of a coach.
Right.
Okay. They're more responsible. They make their own decisions, but I can coach them about life issues. But sometimes those conversations can get very hard, just like you had hard conversations when you were dad, the director.
Right.
Uh, but I don't know why those balloons went up, but uh, but I think we can get through to our kids a lot better and preserve the relationship if we keep our EQ high and keep the emotions down. We have to
Right.
manage our emotions.
Yeah. Yeah, and especially with little kids, I mean, keeping your energy low, or not necessarily low, but just keeping it at a relatively even level, so that way they understand it and don't try to match your energy.
Right.
And one of the things that I would talk about when it comes to parenting is we all have seasons where we go through, we're just super busy. And if your child comes up to you and needs to talk to you, hey, it's okay to tell your child, hey, can you give me I want to hear your story. I want to hear what's bothering you, but I need just 1 minute to finish this one task that I'm doing. Can you just give me 5 minutes, and then I promise I'll come and you'll have my full undivided attention. It's okay to do that if you have
Yeah.
to. But sitting there and playing on your phone while your son's trying to tell you something that happened to him at school today and you're half hearing is not appropriate. So you need
Right.
to make sure you're giving your kids your undivided attention. And it's like I said, it's okay to say, hey, son, I appreciate what you're trying to tell me. I'm really, really busy, but can you give me just 5 minutes to finish this? And then I promise I'll give you all my attention. And I'm dying to hear what you have to tell me, or I'm dying to
Love
help you
that.
out on whatever it is. So
I love that.
yeah. Reggie, if my listeners, viewers wanted to look you up, learn a little bit more about you, best places for them to do that, best places for them to get the book. And then if you have any upcoming, obviously we know about this weekend, but by the time this episode comes out, it'll have passed. But any upcoming book signings that you're doing locally?
Well, we don't have one plan beyond this Sunday, but this Sunday, if you're local, come to Chaos Bubble Shop in Chino Hills on Grand Avenue. It's going to be a networking party, book signing. We're going to have free food. I'm going to do a couple of talks during the time, but it's from 3 to 6. And if you're local, love for you to come out, purchase a book, love to take a photo with you, sign your book, and just have a great time of networking and getting to know each other. I'm very active on social media. I do a lot on LinkedIn. It's Dr. Reggie Thomas on LinkedIn. Instagram is Regman308. 308 is because that's my best marathon. I run a 308. That's
Oh,
my
wow.
yeah, Regman308. And then on Facebook, it's just Reggie Thomas.
Okay.
And then I do have a website. It's just peakpotential.com. Peak with an E, peakpotential.com.
Can they get your books on your peak performance or peak potential, excuse me, peak potential website, or is there another place they should go?
I have a link and a QR code on LinkedIn. All you got to do
Okay.
is just scan it with your phone. It'll take you straight to Amazon to where my book is, and you can just purchase it right then and there. There's a Kindle version and also paperback version.
All right. One other question before I let you go. When it comes to the book, any possibilities for audio of the book?
I'm going to be working with a studio to do the audio. I know that's huge. The publisher that I use, they only do Kindle and paperback.
Uh-huh.
You have to find your own studio to do the audio version, but I'm definitely going to get it on audio. So
Oh, cool.
I'm talking to a few people right now about the best options for doing that.
Awesome. Okay, cool.
And I think I'm
Well,
going to use my own voice. Some people pay a voice, but I think I'm going to use my own voice to
yeah,
do
it's more
it.
personal. I like because I listen to a lot of audiobooks and I like when it's the person's own voice that's doing it
Yeah.
instead of a paid reader. So well, good for you. That's awesome. Yeah, so I'll make sure that the links are in the show notes and all that stuff. But Reggie, I'm looking forward to continuing our friendship. Obviously, we're local, we're like neighbors. So you and I definitely need to sit down and break some bread together and kind of get to know each other a little bit more. I'd love to do that with you. And then obviously, I'm definitely going to pick up the book and have you sign it and get a pick and all that kind of stuff.
Well, I'm glad we had this time. We first met probably 2 years ago at a coffee shop.
Yep.
Mutual friend introduced us, Travis LaFon. He introduced us at Canterbury, I believe it was.
Uh-huh.
Course, you and I connected on social media, so we've gone back and forth on social media. But yeah, I'd love to take this beyond this podcast and spend more time with you. I mean, we got a
Yeah.
lot in common. Got a lot in common. We share a lot of the same values and same philosophies. Of course, our own faith in Christ. We share that fellowship and that bond as well. So yeah, love to get to know you better and spend more time with you, Bryan. But thanks
Awesome.
for having me, man. This was great conversation. I love this.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much for being on. Listen, for my viewers, for my audience, you guys, this has been another phenomenal episode with my good friend, Dr. Reggie Thomas. Make sure you guys are going to check out his website. You can check him out on his social media. If you have a question, maybe you're experiencing burnout. Maybe it's something else that you want to talk to him about. Maybe there's something that he can help you with, and you want to ask him a question. Feel free to do that through his social media, and he'll be happy to respond to you. He's very active there. Unless you send him a weird question, he's not going to respond to those. But if you have a real question that you want to talk to him about, please do that. Obviously, check out his website and make sure you pick up his books as well. And as always, if you are not yet subscribed to my show, please make sure you do that. Hit that little bell so that you get the notifications so you don't miss any of the awesome guests that I have on each and every week. And like I say, I look forward to seeing you all on the next episode of Dad Up. Wow, another amazing episode in the books. So much was shared, and I'm truly grateful my guest was able to pour into you to help you elevate your dad game and really dad up. Make sure you bang that subscribe button so you don't miss a single episode. And while you're here, please don't forget to leave me a rating and a review. I always appreciate the feedback. And one last thing, don't forget, your role as a dad is one of the most important roles you have. So if you need a little help or have questions, don't hesitate to reach out to me on my website at daduptribe.com or at my Instagram page at daduppodcast. Until next time, everyone, Dad up.